for women in technology, and talking through some of the ways that our panelists have had to overcome certain challenges in their careers. Also talking through the importance of inclusion and diversity and having women and minorities join the technology and data science space. So today we have three amazing women leaders joining us from top companies, including Amgen, Snap, and IBM, to chat through some of these issues. And as a reminder, we are live. So if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to put it on the session Q&A on the Whova app. And then also this session is recorded as well for anyone that wants to refer back to it. And then quick intro, as Dimas mentioned, Harnham, we are the global leaders in data and analytics recruitment. So we have around just about 15 years of experience in the recruitment space, including areas of digital and advanced analytics, data engineering and technology, life science analytics, and then of course, data science and machine learning. And we focus on everything ranging from entry-level positions all the way to executive and C-level positions as well. And then we cover everything from San Francisco to New York, so all over the US. Just to start off, would love to have our panelists give a quick introduction. Kerry, starting off with you, definitely would love to get an intro from you.
Sure. I'm Carrie Weinberg. I lead data science and engineering for digital health and innovation at Amgen. And my pronouns are she and her. And my dog Maya will keep jumping up on me throughout this panel. So I hope that's not too much of a distraction for you all.
We love Maya, no problem. Sonali, love an intro from you.
Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Sonali Sun, and I head our monetization, data science, and applied ML at Snapchat, and I go by she.
Amazing. And then Stacey.
Hi, Stacey Ronaghan. I'm a senior data scientist with IBM, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. So great to have you guys here. And then as Dimas mentioned, so I currently head up our team specializing in data science, machine learning, and computer vision, spearheaded the data science market for Southern California for Harnham. And then we also have Karla. She's also the other moderator. Karla, would love an intro from you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. My name's Carla Guerra. I'm a senior recruitment consultant at Harnham, working out of the same office as Kristianna, back here in San Francisco. I also help lead the data science and AI recruitment practice, particularly started with a focus in the Bay Area market. I was actually formerly a software engineer, but moved into recruitment as a means to impact diversity and inclusion initiatives. I identify as Latinx. I go by she, they, and now, obviously working with some of the most in-demand professionals in the space. So looking forward to this chat.
Thank you, Karla. So just starting off our session today, just wanted to kind of jump into more about data science and a little introduction from all of you guys. So starting with you, Sonali, would love if you could give an intro in, data science is a very, very broad term. So what does data science mean to you and to your organization?
It is a broad term, and Snapchat is still trying to figure out how to think about data science. It's a pendulum at Snap. We came from a place where we had a couple of data scientists doing a broad range of work to trying to get to a more centralized model. And today we're in a place where we've differentiated roles, which used to be a singular data science function, into many different types of data scientists. So at Snap, we have a rather large core product data science team. And this team does everything to support our GTM and product development process. So mostly A/B testing, offline analytics, descriptive analytics, and a lot of operational work to actually support the product into market. And they work very closely with engineers. They work very closely with PMs to understand whether a product is healthy. And then separate from that, we have data science engineering, which is the org I'm in. I'm in engineering. And data science engineers are different in that they can code, they can take their products from offline to prototype to an online model. There is a lot of overlap with the applied machine learning scientist. The key difference is that an applied machine learning scientist usually operates in feature optimization and really trying to figure out the operational pipeline of a machine learning model. And then we have the more architecture related machine learning engineers who are really creating the architecture for allowing for scalable machine learning processes. All of this is in a spectrum at Snap, and they all used to be called data scientists. And today they're very much distinctive and really evolving. And we recognize that. You could notice I didn't even mention data engineering, such as creating DAGs and running flow RIDA jobs and metrics evaluation and creation of those pipelines, which some engineers do a little bit across the organization.
Amazing. So it looks like there's quite a few different types of data scientists within Snap. Kerry, how about you at Amgen? Is it similar or is it a little different?
I'd say it's a little bit different, and it's probably because of the domain expertise that's really required for a lot of the analyses that we do at Amgen. So from my standpoint, I think of data science as the intersection of three major disciplines, being mathematics and statistics, software engineering, computer science, and the domain that's relevant to the area that you're actually studying and developing models for. So for us, that domain would be healthcare, in some cases biology, bioinformatics. And so a lot of times we can find people that are biostatisticians, that are epidemiologists, that once they build some of that knowledge and understanding of newer techniques to do predictive models that weren't something that they necessarily trained on, they have a lot of the fundamentals from a math standpoint. They have the fundamentals from a programming standpoint, just maybe not the right language that we typically use in data science, but they can build that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for data scientists, particularly in the bio and healthcare field, to augment their existing expertise that is at the intersection of quantitative analysis to life sciences, and then build on learning computer science fundamentals as well as newer machine learning methodologies and be able to use that. And so for my team specifically, we really focus on machine learning applied to biology as well as human disease and marketing behavior in the life science industry. But there's others that are across Amgen as well as in the life sciences that are essentially fundamentally biostatisticians or epidemiologists that can that have built off of their their existing expertise.
Amazing. So it definitely seems like data scientists can come from a lot of different backgrounds. Stacey, how about you at IBM?
Also slightly different. So we definitely have internal teams which will align with what Sonali is talking about in terms of building products and infusing data science and AI within those teams. But the majority of our data scientists are actually consultants, so we're externally facing roles. So we have that science and statistical background, but we need that domain expertise from our clients. So that's where we kind of partner up with them and collaborate with them to build out whether it's predictive or descriptive analytics, whatever they need. So yeah, it's a little bit different and kind of touches on both. And myself, I've had the opportunity to be very broad in terms of the domains. So I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in retail, I've worked in banking. And that's one of the benefits of consulting. You can kind of dip a toe in and then check something else out and see what takes your fancy. It's a really, really interesting space.
Amazing. So definitely data science, we're seeing data science applied to a few different areas. And just wanted to get an overview. So what does your organization, what are some of the top problems that your organization is using data science or machine learning for at the moment? Kerry, if you want to start that one off.
Yeah, so I think one area that I'm particularly passionate about our application of data science and machine learning is in predicting disease outcomes for patients and using electronic health record data to do that kind of prediction. So two examples that we've done this most recently, one that's been published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research is on our machine learning algorithms to predict the risk of someone's having a fracture in the next 2 years using their historical electronic health record data. So right now, many people that are over the age of 50 are really high risk of having a fracture, not aware of it. It's actually really underdiagnosed for men in particular. And so that's one example, actually, just to hit on like the gender and diversity angle. There's, essentially a hypothesis or an impression Osteoporosis is more prevalent in women, absolutely, due to menopause, but for men, it's actually quite prevalent, but there's a lot of stigmatism against perceiving older men as being fragile. And so there's this sort of like perverse mentality in terms of men's risk of fracture that is, is basically, sex oriented and not, scientifically oriented necessarily. And so because of this issue, where if this, predicting someone's risk of fracture being, very relatively conducted and under treated, we have used this methodology based on natural language processing to predict if the next word in the sentence, if you think of like sentence completion in Smart Complete, Smart Compose from Google, we're doing the same thing, but we're looking at what's the likelihood that the next word in the sentence is fracture using the codes in your electronic health record. And so then this work we've just published with a few leading bone researchers in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, like I mentioned, and that's an area I'm really passionate about. The other one, which is much more pressing, is understanding what are the drivers of someone's risk of adverse outcomes to COVID-19. And so we're conducting active research using machine learning as well as more traditional statistical analyses to understand that and preparing, conducting a study and being able to publish on the results later this year.
That's really, really cool to hear, applying it to really relevant problems in our society today. Stacey, how about you at IBM?
Again, it's consultancy, so it's incredibly broad across all the domains. And also as a company, our goal is to help our clients go through that data science and AI journey, which could be starting from discovering what opportunities there are in their business, and then figuring out how to track that with metrics, and then building some solutions for that. So examples that I've been involved in are retail, so predicting what stock should be in the right store at the right time to make sure we reduce the number of markdowns and increase the number of sales. I've had a company ask for who should their thought leaders be in their industry, so how can I figure out based on kind of white papers and things and conferences they go to and kind of their network, who they should be inviting for various reasons. And then another healthcare one, predicting disease spaces. I don't know, I feel like I have just lots of random ones, which I feel very grateful to be a part of. And then also as a company, one of our goals is to provide companies with tools. So we have the data science tools like Cognos of SPSS. We have a whole platform called Cloud Pack for Data that kind of does all your data collection, your analysis, and then fusing your AI into your business for deployment and stuff. So our goal is to kind of both be the consultants and provide services to build the models, but also empower our clients to use our tools as well and kind of train them up. And another quick thing that I've been very grateful for is sometimes when I work in my client companies, they have transitioning data scientists or newer data scientists, and I get the opportunity to kind of pass any knowledge I can to them, make sure they understand what I've done, and give some education as well. So I find that work very beneficial too.
Yeah, for sure. And that just goes to show like how many different types of problems data science can really be applied to. Sonali at Snap, what are some of the top challenges or top problems you guys are working on at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, as it pertains to ML particularly, it's for us, we're obsessed with optimization and being able to process ML on a mobile processor, which is incredibly hard to do. Our two big passion projects that most of our users know about is AR, facial recognition, environmental world recognition, sound recognition. All of that is powered by ML, deep learning models on a mobile processor. So trying to optimize that, again, the engineering skill set with the feature model development skill set. And then on the other hand, we really care about optimization in the ads field. So trying to think about the right ad to the right user at the right time, that is an ongoing problem. When I think about personalization and optimization when it comes to ad personalization, you would think that it's a solved problem. But what makes it really interesting is that it's easy when you use all and any data available to you at any time. At Snap, we think about privacy in a way that respects users and privacy ethics. So for us, the idea is how do we create an optimized experience for users that allows advertisers to get value from our platform in a way that respects users. And really, the policy regimes that are happening with GDPR and CCPA, it just scratches the surface of what's inevitable. And iOS 14 is also creating a lot of changes in terms of expectations and in terms of attribution. So personalization is really an evolving field, and we really are thinking about how to create an ML ads-friendly experience that puts privacy and ethics in front of the users and before anything else.
Amazing. Definitely can see that personalization recommendation is a huge area in data science and machine learning at the moment. And then now for the next question, just want to get a little bit more into, each one of the panelists and their backstory. So how did you guys get into, your field and this data science field? Stacey, starting with you.
Sure. So I did mathematics at university because I was lucky enough to be good at it and I enjoyed it. And then I wasn't quite sure what to do with that when I left. I didn't want to be an accountant or go into actuarial science, and they were the only kind of big companies that came to visit me. So I kind of fell into market research, and then decided, having studied abroad, I wanted to live abroad again. So moved to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, to join a broadband company as an analyst. And within that role, I was doing kind of a lot of descriptive analytics and a bit of forecasting, looking at competitor analysis. And then I came across big data. So this is where I aged myself a little bit. I don't know if people still use that term quite so much, but I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to be doing this. So I joined IBM, and they appreciated my mathematical background and my soft skills and my lack of coding. I did a little bit of R at the time, but I wasn't the best coding. I can see other people not appreciating quite so much my copy and paste rather than creating functions. And so I joined IBM, and they kind of did on-the-job coding skills learning. And I was actually working in a team where we were looking at GPU functionality. And I was like, ooh, what functionality would work with GPUs? And I discovered that machine learning was a good option. Like, mathematically, it's very highly parallelizable. And I was like, yes, this sounds really fun. This is really interesting. This was in 2013. So I was kind of one of those first wave that took the Andrew on Coursera Intro to Machine Learning course and was hooked. I was like, this is the space I want to be in, machine learning, data science. And then I started working with open source and proprietary big data tools within IBM. Spent a lot of time working with Spark, and then transitioned to more recently like your TensorFlow and your Keras. So yeah, that kind of took me to consulting eventually.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of, now that data science is such a hot field, there's so many new courses popping up, new kind of programs popping up as well. Going to you, Sonali, how did you get into, this field?
My background is in applied statistics, and then I went to graduate school for applied economics, but I really loved econometrics. That's what I loved. I liked trying to figure out how to collect data to understand behavior. I didn't really think too much about these theoretical models that they present to us in economics. And then in that process during graduate school, I worked in healthcare. We did conjoint studies on pricing and market research, and felt that health work brought me into creating some applications for Microsoft. And so I decided to drop out of a PhD program and join Microsoft as they bought or started investing in this small company called Facebook back then. I'm aging myself here. And so for Facebook, we would use some of their data to try to help price some of that inventory at Facebook. And it just exploded from there. From Microsoft, I worked at Amazon. Back then, I was the first data scientist in AWS, which was this crazy concept. We didn't know what cloud computing was at Amazon. We were just trying to figure out how to forecast network utilization, and going from a place where I'm using data created by humans or in a very structured and experimental setting to a place where machines are constantly creating data. To your point, Stacey, big data back then was trying to figure out how to not have my Hadoop instances completely break constantly, because we had routers have, read data every 5 seconds at least. How do we make use of this? How do we do this to optimize network scaling for AWS? And then from AWS went down to Los Angeles and started working at Snapchat and helped Snapchat go to IPO in terms of data quality, and now doing and growing this monetization and data science and ML team. So I guess the long story short is that a wide range of background experiences. And I think most of the people that I hire for our team have a wide range of experiences. And the best ones are the ones that come from biostats or have done a wide degree of experience, have a wide degree of experiences with different companies, because in the end of the day, data is data. And the really great ones are the ones that can kind of pick and choose models that are applicable in the context, which might not traditionally have been. For example, just the other day, someone just did a presentation on using survival analysis for churn prediction, which is a great application. But 10 years ago, you would have never thought about using survival analysis for advertiser churn. So that's my background.
Amazing. I love the point that you mentioned that, you guys look for diverse backgrounds. So many of the hiring managers we work with, they look at their current team and then they find the missing skill set, and then they go out there and find the missing skill set, not someone that can do exactly what their current team can do. And then Kerry, would love to hear a little bit more about how you got into this field.
Yeah, I think of two distinct experiences that probably predicted my inclusion into this field, and one is an experience in high school, and the other is an experience after undergrad in my first job. So in high school, I did research at Cornell Medical College because I grew up in New York City. I could walk down the street to go work in the lab there, and I worked on the developing chicken retina. And I remember looking at slides of histology and seeing the more how the cells looked. And my postdoc was like, "Oh, that's a differentiated cell." And I was like, "How do you know that?" And he goes, "Well, it looks like this." And my experience at that time told me, why am I as a human making that determination that cell's shape is what it means? There should be a computer that should be making this. So that was pretty early on. I knew that I was really passionate about the intersection of biology and math and computer science. So when I went to MIT, I studied biological engineering, which included that plus electrical engineering and mechanical engineering, just kind of studying biology through the lens of engineering from multiple disciplines. So after undergrad, I went to work at Beckman Coulter, which is a life science instrumentation company, and I worked on cell sorters, which are extremely complex instruments with 7 lasers. They sort individual biological cells, 100,000 cells per second. Huge amounts of data are generated to be able to then analyze them and help scientists, particularly cancer researchers, better understand cells. And so while I was working there, I gravitated more to statistical analysis, partly because I didn't want to get pull late hours on the weekends having to fix the instruments. So you can always do data science and analysis from your home. You don't need to go into lab on the weekend to go fix something. So part of my gravitation to data science actually was out of convenience, as well as love for analyzing biology with math. And then when I went back to MIT for my MBA and my master's in biological engineering, and when I was back at MIT, I did my research. I was industry sponsored at Amgen, studying why. So our proteins are actually made using mammalian cells, which actually, interestingly, because of COVID, a lot more people are learning about it. They're referencing Regenerons, therapies, and stuff. But most biotech manufacturers engineer mammalian cells to actually produce proteins. And so my graduate research was on understanding what makes particular cell lines more productive. We actually have to interrogate biology to figure out why things are happening. We can't just kind of select, like an aerospace manufacturer could select, I'm going to use a faster motor or something. We actually have to figure out how to get the biology to work with us. And so I really enjoyed that experience. That's why I came back to Amgen. I was initially in our operations organization, and then I got pulled into a corporate-wide initiative on data science. And over the past 3 years, I've built up my team to include data scientists, machine learning engineers, mathematician. I work with epidemiologists. I work with marketers. I work with genomicists. So it's a really incredible experience. And now, actually, Sonali, thanks to a lot of AWS's initial efforts in machine learning, most of my team gets to automate a lot of things on SageMaker that we used to do manually. So I think all of us are kind of just automating rote tasks out of our lives, and maybe that's sort of the theme of what I've done so far.
That's amazing. And another great example of, a different kind of background applied to the data science space. For everyone, we're loving all these questions, everyone that's adding them to the comments section on the Whova app. Just a reminder, we are going to be going through them in our next section. So keep asking those questions and we'll definitely get to that. Just one last question before we kind of jump into our next section here. So, what are the most interesting trends or topics that you guys see within data and analytics or the data science field that, might be happening this year? Sonali, starting with you.
That's a big question. There's so many, and it's evolving. I think with COVID-19, it's also changed. But I mean, I don't think fundamentally differential privacy is top of mind for us. That is a really important topic for us, and within ML as well. Being able to get to that, being able to expand the scope and impact without compromising user identity and behaviors requires a lot of work, and there's some incredible work happening in this space. So I think that's the most important topic for us.
Yeah, definitely. Kerry, to you, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like into end of 2019 and into 2020, an area that at least my team has been really passionate about is reusing methodologies that are much more commonly used in other fields and repurposing them to biotech when it makes sense. And so one technique that we've been very hyped on is just repurposing a lot of sequential learning techniques to the sequential nature of healthcare and life sciences data. So we can think of that in terms of, genome sequences, but we can also think that in terms of sequences of actions, of progression of someone's disease. And so that's an area my team's been really passionate about. I think in the past year, a methodology that's become more, it's kind of in data science is really funny because there's a lot of what is old is new again. So a lot of methods that have been around for like 40 years are becoming popular again. And the concept effectively of Bayesian causal networks has become really popular, at least in my network, in terms of, having the ability to have interpretability does become important. I used to kind of like poo-poo that actually in the past, but now working on, COVID-19, understanding COVID-19, it's really obvious. Like if we don't understand why someone's more at risk, we can't be actionable about it. It has nothing to do with the clinicians not trusting the algorithm. It has everything to do with like actionability. And sometimes we don't need that interpretability to have something be actionable. With the fracture risk example I gave, like all you need is a flag to know that somebody's at risk of a general disease state in which there's a lot of understanding of that disease. But for COVID, we really don't understand the disease that well. Everybody is basically a PhD in COVID right now who's working on COVID this year. So it's quite difficult, and having a high degree of interpretability becomes super important. So I think the two things would be like repurposing methodologies to different domains, but then also the trade-off between interpretability really depends on the cost of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point that you made. And of course, COVID-19 is the talk of, everywhere right now. Stacey, what do you think about this?
So I'm going to steal Sonali's privacy and Kerry's interpretability, because ethical and responsible AI is the topic I am most concerned about and interested in, and it's something I'm actively working in. So that includes when you're building models, making sure they're fair, when your products are inclusive, explainability to actually make them useful, but also for trust, and then also for having teams to be kind of accountable for what they're building. And that can be, in the design phase, you're considering a diverse set of stakeholders and their requirements, with the goal of building that inclusive product, and also looking at possible tensions or harms that you could cause. Within research, there's a lot of work being done right now in terms of how do you quantify things such as fairness, or how do you mathematically ensure that? Similarly, how do you use more machine learning to prove why machine learning works in the first place? Like, how do you make machine learning explainable? And there's a couple of libraries. So AIX 360 is AI Explainability 360, and AIF 360, AI Fairness 360, that I've actively worked with clients on or use these tools to help them. And I'm actually a contributor to those projects as well, or those open source projects.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. And then we do want to kind of go into more of our gender and diversity topic, of course. Karla, to you.
Thanks, Chris. So obviously, to the purpose of of this chat is to highlight some issues and disparities that we see in this field. So wanted to transition to speak a bit more directly on some of those gender and diversity issues. And just to kind of start, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the data points and survey insights that we got as a business. Harnham actually releases a diversity and inclusion report every single year. This year was our third iteration. I'm just gonna share my screen now just to kind of give people a bit of a sneak peek to this. But essentially what we cover in this diversity guide is, we're looking at not just gender divide, right? But we're looking at a bunch of different factors, including disability, which is something that a lot of people don't talk about. And essentially we surveyed around 3,265 participants globally. And that's also in combination with our salary survey that goes out every year. And, we can also drop the link to access this if anyone is curious to some of these findings and wants to download. But essentially, we saw that diversity, is the talk of the town. But I think what is important to really hone down on is the need to be proactive and have some of these conversations, understand challenges and grow from that. So just to talk a bit more about some disclaimers here. Our guide really isn't a roadmap to a specific solution, but more so a bird's eye view of where we currently stand and what we should specifically be reflecting on. Because at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all solution, when it comes to diversity. And, so we had actually 99.5% of respondents answer that they either identified as male or female. So that's kind of the dichotomy of the gender that we're looking at right now, but also understanding fully that gender is not binary. But one of the things that we did see is that there's a huge positive sign this year of women's presence generally increasing in this field. Last year, we saw 23% of data and analytics professionals identifying as women, and this year we saw 4% growth to 27%. The advanced analytics space, covering more of that like marketing analytics or descriptive and predictive analytics being the highest with 43%. And digital analytics being right behind that, just above 40%. Data science, however, has the lowest percentage, even across data and technology, which would include DevOps professionals, data engineering, software engineering, being around 20%, but still an increase of 4% from 16% that we had last year. Again, I know I'm throwing out a bunch of numbers here, but what I want to draw back on is that this is a huge change, and actually the most significant change from last year to this year that we've seen from our findings, from other findings in regards to the gender diversity that we're seeing, the female women representation in this field. And I think a lot of that has to do with the efforts, the allyships that you're seeing, the diversity that you're seeing from people's backgrounds. Sonali, Kerry, Stacey, all of you have very, unconventional routes to this. And this is something that I see in my day job, day in and day out, is that people start from a very, just really being passionate about data, and then finding your own route to this space has been extremely inspiring, and I hope is inspiring for everyone who's chiming in. But we're seeing that more and more women are finding themselves in those entry-level roles and growing in those roles, actually twice as many professionals compared to men. Which is really exciting. So just to segue from there, I would love to, start off with the question, and I'll go to you, Kerry, just to understand some of the challenges that you faced in your growth and your path to your current position.
Yeah, I think probably most of my more formative experiences that were related to gender were right after I graduated from MIT. MIT is about 50-50 male-female split. And then the department I was in biological engineering was 60% female. I was in a sorority and I played women's tennis. So actually most of my experience in MIT was pretty female dominated. But in my first job, I was one of two women under the age of 50 at the site I was at in engineering, and I think one of three women in engineering overall at a site that was about 50. So definitely felt a very big difference in terms of representation off the bat. I do think that, more so the issue that I saw in that environment was continual hiring of people of the same mindset, the same schooling, the same background from an engineering standpoint, and inherently hampers your ability to think creatively. And it's something that I'm really careful to think about myself as I hire and grow my own team, is I don't want to create a team where everyone is the same sort of mindset. I don't want a team that's full of people of the same background as me, because I know that there's going to be areas that are going to be blind spots for me. So the way that I've experienced it more recently has been really positive at Amgen, and particularly for my team, which is racially, gender, scientific background diverse. It's wonderful because then we can work on a solution, and then we have someone who can look at it from a totally orthogonal perspective. It's really important when you're trying to mitigate bias inherently in your modeling that you're developing, making sure you're not missing a really key element, and also just coming up with much more creative solutions that when you bring people together from a lot of different backgrounds, you can actually achieve. So I'm very, very passionate about diversity from a number of different angles, just because I think it produces exceptional results, and the data shows this. And it's important, not only from a gender and racial and age standpoint, but also from an engineering and STEM background standpoint as well.
Amazing. I can resonate. So I went to Harvey Mudd for my undergrad, and we had a similar split 50-50, and I had complete culture shock right after going straight into industry. So I'm seeing a lot of even workshops that are being led by industry professionals or institutions that are helping make some of that transition a little bit easier. And again, a lot of those diversity initiatives from organizations to have a very open mind about how can we create an inclusive environment is important, and great to hear from your experience. Sonali, I'm curious to hear a bit more about your experience and challenges getting to where you are.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question for me is bathrooms. I say that because when I was at Amazon and AWS, literally an entire floor of just males, and it would be me and one other woman we have the women's bathroom all to ourselves. And when after 2 years, there was one more woman that joined. She was the administrative assistant to our VP, and we welcomed her with open arms. Now we have 3 women who can use this bathroom. And the multiple dramas, when suddenly there were feet in there, they were not one of ours. So what I'm trying to get at here is that many times I'm going to echo Carrie's, very, very much agree with what Carrie was saying, in that we really want to dismantle the archetype of what an engineer looks like. At Snapchat is not really about hiring one more woman or trying to have representation in all the boxes. We really think about underrepresented groups. And how do we do that? We are very much cognizant of the fact, just like Carrie said, that we have a tendency and have been hiring from the same schools. We ask the same questions, and everyone has the same pedigree. I went to Cornell, we have people who went to Stanford, and we all ask the same questions. We all went to the same engineering schools, and we all know the same VCs. And that's just perpetuating a cycle and circle that we're not happy with. My own story in terms of startups and being an engineer, I have 2 kids in the time that Snapchat has grown. I'm a mother, and being able to grow a career and trying to grow in those executive ranks while also being successful is hard. But it's okay to show that, and it's okay to have multiple breadwinners in a household. And that's something that we're embracing. Evan, our CEO at Snapchat, it really starts at the top. He has a commitment to have equal representation at the board and at the C-suite, which he's achieved, and it's really resonating at all levels at our company. We're really focusing about supporting growth from new hire all the way to facilitating that growth within Snap. So we have a Snap Up program, which is intended for people who come from non-traditional backgrounds, where, you know, a year of rotating around different engineering departments, including data science, machine learning, and learning the ropes in a way that you're not necessarily taught. And I'm talking about University of Michigan. I'm not, you know, we're talking about grade A schools where you might not necessarily be taught. It's like the SATs, like the right answers to the right questions during interviews in the tech interview process. So we're really trying to commit to a transparent comp structure. And everyone's very much embracing the fact that diversity means at all levels, having mothers, having fathers, supporting different types of archetypes, different archetypes of an engineer at Snap.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate a lot of that, and I think it's really, I think, inspiring to hear that these are things that like are very, very you know, kind of, well, not just commonplace, but there's a line of like relatability here that I think some people like forget to have some of these conversations in the workplace. And you know, it's great to understand a bit more of, you know, what's going underneath the hood. Stacey, on to you. Like, what are some of the challenges that you saw, you know, kind of growing in your career?
I've kind of hit every stereotypical woman in tech bingo, I think. So the most common one is being the only woman in the room. So again, as a consultant, so although I do see many more women in data science than I did when I sat with engineers, but not so much in the kind of machine learning research areas, nor in consulting. So there's still a barrier there. So yeah, I'm often in the room, the only woman, and I definitely had my ideas stolen or be spoken over. One of the most recent bizarre ones was I said my idea and then someone congratulated someone else on the idea, who was a guy who hadn't really spoken the entire meeting. And so I'm just like, this is perplexing. And so I'm very grateful for any allies I have there. So I tend to know someone else in these rooms with me. And I might need to tell them my experience because they might not notice it themselves. But as soon as I have kind of brought this up and been like, look, this has happened in the last meeting, or I've had this problem before, can you just keep an eye out for it? And then they've kind of been very nice and kind of nodded to me, shut down someone else speaking when I've, you know, when I'm speaking and they're talking over me. And something I'm still trying to work on myself, if I'm very honest, is I naturally urge myself to become more palatable. So I don't want to be the loud, aggressive woman in the room. And so I caveat my sentences with stupid things like, oh, you might have already thought of this, but, or, oh, sorry if you already covered this, even though I know they didn't, because I'm a very good listener, I still feel like I need to kind of wiggle my way in there rather than just saying my opinion. So this is something that I'm personally working on, because for whatever reason, it's become a weird tick of mine, I guess. And yeah, and just, I think because of these things, I'm grateful for the allies I have. And also it's encouraged me to network, to find other women in my field, particularly in my company, and to also mentor. And even if it's just being someone that people can vent to when they go through something like this, or even tears. No, I don't know if any woman wants to cry at work. So to have someone to just even have a Zoom call and just be like, I try and be that person because I know I've needed that person in the past.
That's awesome. You know, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to kind of, you know, wanting to have an ally there. And we actually had a question, you know, from one of our viewers right now, Srayoshi Baduri, asking a question actually that you might have answered a bit already, but it's really, you know, how can you be an effective ally? Because it sounds like allyship is important, you know, in anyone's career growth, but particularly perhaps a bit more when you know, you are a minority in this particular field. So I guess to Kerry, how do you feel about allyship, and how would you define that as being effective?
I think of allyship in, I guess, one way, but it manifests itself kind of differently. So I don't think of allyship as, look, I'll say what I don't think it is, because I've seen examples where people try so hard to be allies and it's just comes off not the way they intend. I think if you're a good ally, it means if you see someone who is underrepresented, who is a high performer or has a lot of potential, bring up their name when the opportunity presents itself. For, hey, can you nominate someone for this role? Or do you think this person would be good for this project? If you're in a position of leadership, that should be the expectation. That's how you really help people. In the situation that Stacey was describing, I've definitely seen that happen to people that I've worked with in the past. And that's where, if you're in a position of leadership, and I really take it on myself now that I'm in that role where I can help, then I make sure that I'm like, hey, wait a second, let's make sure that this person has their chance to speak. And I think as women and in general, as people who are passionate about, diversity in the workplace, advance in their careers, it's really important that they, actually they have a role to play in that, and being able to kind of open the field for that. I think the other element of allyship that I experience is, and maybe it more kind of morphs into mentorship as well, is having very strong, close, working relationships with other female leaders in your organization, or other leaders in your organization. But I always feel that there's an extra, like, special level of understanding that I have with other female leaders at Amgen, particularly those that are higher up in the organization than I am. And they are amazing sounding boards, and they are amazing for soliciting feedback and advice from. And mentorship, I was telling a friend of mine recently, is a two-way street. Sometimes it's not just taking from your mentor and advice, it's also, you as a leader in STEM, or a growing leader in STEM, you have something to offer to that relationship that you can provide to that person that you look up to, that can help them as well. And so that's just one angle that I would share. And then, the last I would say is that it's, I think it's all about representation and nominating people for representation in projects and roles. That really is the most impactful way people can manifest allyship. It's not just saying I'm supportive of women, why don't you participate in this, like, female mentorship group that I lead? Just having that, but then, actions speak louder than words. Just having a group that you're associated with, or maybe you gave a couple of advice sessions to somebody, isn't the same as doing it like day in, day out, and having it always on your mind.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest takeaways, that I got from what you just described is that having that feedback loop and transparency, and I think really kind of settling the where you should lie kind of on that spectrum of being involved is being responsible. And I think when you're being responsible and taking ownership of that, you're able to, like you said, not necessarily just kind of go through obligations or the formalities of things, but be very involved in being proactive, essentially. Sonali, to you, I'd like to understand a bit more about your interpretation of allyship, and how you might kind of generate that, as well as have received it in the past.
Yeah, I actually think this is one of the most thought-provoking questions, because it's a difficult question. I would say in the past, it was easier to answer. It seems straightforward. Have empathy and offer advice to help people be where they are. Provide mentorship. But I think in the last several months, it's become clear that it's not sufficient. And also that's probably not what allyship really means. Most people are not looking for advice. They want to be seen. They want you to listen. And I want to be in a place where I see where someone is coming from, and I see it and I respect it. And as a manager, I set people up for success, and that means equity and justice, so that everyone's starting from the same field. It might mean working harder for some people. It might mean providing more resources for others. But that, for me, in terms of an executive, that's what allyship means.
Amazing. And I know we just got a question from Carolyn or Caroline, sorry if I'm mispronouncing, on any recommendations for local to LA or remote mentorship or networking groups. Not sure if any of those might come to mind for any of you, but I think we could also circle back and maybe comment on Huba if any do come to mind. But I know, Stacey, you talked a little bit about this topic already, but just kind of hearing a bit on Sonali and Kerry's experience. I don't know if there's anything else you might want to add about, what allyship means to you.
I think the only two things that I want to add is kind of share the spotlight. The kind of myth that there's only one seat at the table, that's a complete lie. And I even find myself like, oh, there's another woman in the room. Like, what does that mean? But we should be flooding the room. So yeah, if you have a conference that you're going to attend to and there's a reason to bring someone else in, do. If you, if you're going to be writing a paper, creating a pattern, if there's opportunities to bring other women in, please do, as well as like nominate the right people for the right thing. But also making introductions. So I'm a terrible networker because I feel uncomfortable. I don't like asking for help. I find it really hard to reach out to people, especially in a like cold scenario. But what I found is whenever people have introduced me to someone that's got a similar interest or could be a future mentor or something like that, and so when someone reaches out to you to be asked to be a mentor or just whatever reason, you can always put them in touch with someone else. And even if they don't become a mentor, it just increases their network. And I think I really benefited when people have done that for me. So they're like only additional tidbits. Oh, and
awesome.
In LA particular, I believe women in machine learning data science may have just opened a chapter here. You have to fact check that. But I'm hoping if they have, then that will be a good place for networking.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned that actually. I know the Bay Area chapter is really active. I've actually done a couple of talks with them in the past. So if I get any confirmation, I'll definitely be commenting on who was, if anyone's a little bit curious about joining. But kind of moving along, and I want to start with Kerry on this one because I know Chris and I actually had some time to debrief and want to understand a little bit towards some opportunities where you're able to use your identity as a woman as a huge advantage in the workplace. Kerry, you might know what I'm referring to, but I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. But I think sharing a bit of these opportunities can be very important.
Yeah. So I think I know which example you're talking about. So as part of my role at Amgen, my team conducts rotations with our genetics subsidiary in Iceland, Decode Genetics. It's a really incredible organization. They do genomic research on the Icelanders to better understand human disease fundamentally. And so as part of that research, I had 2 women on my team that were doing a rotation there. I was visiting them in Reykjavik last year for a week of really focused research on proteomics, essentially like proteins that are measured from humans. And we were looking at analyzing age, and as people age, the change in their proteomic profile. And we were analyzing it and we saw there was this subset of women that were in the age group 18 to like 55. And they were specifically a subset off of other women that were in the data set. So we could see, we were using UMAP, Uniform Manifold Approximation Projection, representation of the data to be able to visualize these different clusters. So we see this group of women that's very distinctly separate than this other group of women. And we were working with a few other male statisticians and data scientists, and they couldn't understand what could be the difference. They thought it was pregnancy. And so once we identified that in order for patients to be enrolled in the study, they actually couldn't be pregnant. Obviously, our next reaction was, okay, well, they're probably menstruating or it has something to do with their, menstrual cycle. And the fact that the men we were working with didn't draw that connection, it just speaks to kind of like the fundamentals of your own biology and understanding that more in terms of, sorry, I have another dog greeting me. And it just helps you understand the data a lot more when it's relevant to you. Not to say that you can't do that if you're a guy, but I think in biology, I definitely is quite relatable when I'm studying, elements of biology that I myself experience.
Amazing. I think that's such an incredible kind of story to share and experience, because these are kind of some of the nuances that, you know, not everyone gets to kind of you know, see unfold, and I think is important to kind of highlight. Stacey, I don't know if there's a particularly you know, a time or a place where something like this might have happened, but I'm curious to hear about like a circumstance in which your identity as a woman, you know, kind of helped influence or get a better understanding to something at work.
I'm not sure necessarily my identity, but kind of traits that I think align with my identity and how I've kind of navigated the world. In particular, empathy. So I sometimes have too much empathy, and it causes me to kind of stop. But whether that's societal, my parents, it's never really called out as a requirement in the tech community. And I always kind of, yeah, I thought I was going to have to read white papers for breakfast, get the algorithmic flavor of the month, and be as deeply and technical as possible. But one of my biggest assets is this empathy and this kind of drive to solve for user needs rather than being driven by, I want to use this cool algorithm. And also kind of some of the other soft skills of helping me build trusting relationships with my clients. I think those kind of, yeah, interpersonal skills that I've been accustomed to develop have actually been incredible assets, particularly as a consultant. And then also back to kind of the allyship sort of stuff, but just being a Mormon, experiencing some of these biases, it's that awareness has made me a better leader as well. And so kind of unfortunately having to have gone through some of these things, I know these things happen. And so that makes me listen to someone sharing their experience that is different from my own as well. So it's been a lot more around that than like a specific data point.
Yeah, awesome. I think something that I've learned a lot about empathy is that it operates as kind of a feedback loop, and there's articles a lot about it, about how it does make you a really well-rounded thinker. So it's great that, you know, you're navigating the world in that perspective, and it is something that a lot of people forget is a huge asset or a huge thing to kind of like stay in tune with. Going on to you, Sonali, I'm curious to hear a bit more about like your experience kind of navigating your career and finding opportunities that might be related to your identity.
Oh, that's interesting. My inclination to answer this question was because of what I do, I love to trip up machine learning algorithms on various platforms. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, but they're about like math and statistics and like really fun things about the current state of differential privacy, you know, deep learning models. I geek out on a bunch of things, and I love to see what YouTube or Google or Facebook or whatnot likes to infer about who I am or my identity based on my interests. And a lot of that resonates with me because that's what I do for a living at Snap. We try to make inferences about who people are based on what we think the majority of people do and who you should be. And so when I think about that identity, you know, there are famous examples such as mailings to women who we infer are pregnant, and it's incredibly offensive, and it can be heartbreaking for many women too to get that when, say, they're not pregnant or, you know, have loss of pregnancy. So we want to be really empathetic and respectful of what people choose to share about themselves and who they choose to share it with and how they want to be perceived. It's not for us to infer. Yeah.
That's something very interesting because I don't remember if this was a year or 2 years ago. I don't know if you all might be aware, but there was this huge scandal about a large retailer who had sent out actually
Target.
who had sent out some, you know, I think it was coupons or related material over the mail that alluded to a pregnancy, and obviously that could be a huge fracture on privacy. And again, other topics, you know, to tie back into some of the issues in this space, but you know, very interesting perspective. And I guess I'm moving on to a question that's kind of the question of the century, is strategies around diversity hiring. You know, as hiring managers, as people that might be involved in hiring processes or have been through these hiring processes yourself. You know, we actually had a question from Annie Flippo through Huva asking, how do you encourage more people to apply to data science positions? And I think to that, understanding perhaps like some initiatives or strategies to attracting and retaining talent in your orgs or in your experience. I'll start with Stacey.
So I don't have great experience with recruitment, so I apologize, I'm not going to offer much there. But in terms of approaches, I mean, Sonali already touched on these, but diversity is one of kind of 3 aspects that I like to think of. So diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so, yeah, we want diverse teams. We want all those different opinions, points of views. It's going to make us better in everything we do. But we also want to make sure that those individuals are celebrated, their opinions are heard, they feel encouraged to do their contribution, to contribute to their work. And then the equity part of, you know, again, Sonali touched on this, I believe, in terms of some people will need different support to be able to do their job, whether with women, their flexibility of raising a family, so things like that. And so I'm very proud IBM is very good for those things in terms of flexible hours, maternity and paternity leave, things like that. Because even just looking at benefits, I can almost see the breakdown of gender sometimes in like a benefits package. And then for the, you know, retention is incredibly important by considering those three things. And also, you know, I've had a lot of women that joined the tech field the same time as me, and they left because they didn't feel the company met their needs, or they didn't feel appreciated. And so, yeah, I think it's not just when you bring people in, but when you're in there. And then when you have them in there, you can show them to the world if they're willing to be shown. And as part of the allyship, you can celebrate the fact that you do have diversity in your company. And then other people can see, you know, people that look like them talking about the fun mathematical interests that they watch on YouTube. And then when you're going for that interview, one thing that's put me off immediately is just not having a diverse interview panel. So having spoken to a majority white recruitment, or like people that I would potentially work with, and I do appreciate that's a chicken and an egg problem for sure. But assuming you have people that are willing to do those activities, it's a real comfort to me for 2 reasons. One is, okay, I'm not going to be the only one if I were to join this company. But also they're not interviewing me with a biased lens, like because yeah, if they're not female, maybe they don't know that I'm going to be incredibly modest about my achievements. If they're not British, they don't know that necessarily. And so I think that's important as well. So it's very much being seen throughout the process. And I know there's a pipeline problem. I'm hoping the other 2 will kind of touch onto that as well. But that's definitely something that, and even when I was looking into joining this field, I didn't really even know how to navigate that. So if you know people that are interested in math, whether they're people still at school, and you can encourage them and tell them about this cool data science path, and you know, introduce them to someone within the organization and do that networking for them, like I said before, I think that's really beneficial.
Awesome. And then going on to you, Kerry, I'm curious to understand a bit more about your current, you know, your current strategies or perhaps methods of diverse recruitment.
I think for women in particular, my approach has been relatively simple, and I essentially leverage my women in STEM networks. So one really easy one that has been very successful for me was using my sorority network from MIT, actually. I sent a note out to my sorority mailing list about 2 years ago when I was looking for hires, and one of the women who responded is now a senior data scientist on my team. She's been with me for the past 2 years. and she was wrapping up her PhD and was really interested in the role, but wouldn't have necessarily heard about it or thought about it had it not been for another woman who was connected with her through our experience, our shared experience. And so I think, but it's not just like, okay, let me find another woman from MIT I can hire. It's also, who else might someone in my network know? And for me, it's a lot easier to find other women through other women. It's kind of logical. I do think it's really important, like hiring for orgs that want to have diversity, hiring their first couple underrepresented groups is usually the hardest, because as Stacey said, nobody wants to be the first woman. And always, you know, I know from my friends that are at startups, people are like so excited when they hire their first woman. You know, nobody wants to feel like they are having to represent their whole gender in every interaction at their company. And so I think it's also doesn't really give you a ton of confidence in an organization if you're their only female, you know, engineer or their only female data scientist in terms of their commitment to diversity and inclusion. So I think it has to be a constant focus, and it's one that I've actually impressed upon my recruiters when I've hired. And you wouldn't think that you would have to, right? Because that's usually an inferred thing for recruiting when you're hiring for especially in STEM roles. But when I was getting a few candidates and I was like, these are all the same kind of demographic, or these are all the same kind of experience, can you give me more people? And the fact, if you're a hiring manager, you actually need to have a front row seat in that kind of evaluation. You can't always just leave it to whoever someone's sourcing it to you, because that's just bakes bias in further. So I think my two examples are like being proactive in terms of your hiring manager, you know, actively asking for it, and then also, you know, leveraging your network if you're a woman in data science or in STEM to find other women in data science and STEM.
Yeah, amazing. I think Chris and I could probably attest to this a little bit more, but as like being on that like sourcing ground and looking for these people, I think we find ourselves sometimes having to kind of revert back and say, you know, it's interesting, you had kind of like this bias versus this person, this other person, like I want to call you out for it, or even like on language and just understanding that sometimes they're saying like, I want him to do this, I want him to have this, you know, and kind of reeling it back and saying, you mean him or her or they, right? So I think it's a lot of nuances to it for us to kind of unlearn and learn best practices. I'm curious, Sonali, kind of, you know, what you've done from your perspective to, you know, stay close to a more diverse community and maybe attract or retain some folks from that perspective.
Just to echo what Kerry said, and to put more stress on it, taking a front seat as a hiring manager and telling your managers, the managers that I manage, to also have a front seat in sourcing candidates, looking, going to conferences and looking and talking to people. Because oftentimes they don't want to approach you. You have to approach them. You have to talk. And in the same way, we were kind of trained in the last year or maybe last 2 years is, oh, we just have more people in the funnel. Just increase the recruitment funnel, the pipeline, and we're going to increase numbers. And that's not enough, because like I said previously, we're trained to ask the same questions or expect the same types of answers. And we can't do that. Nor can we expect people to come on board and know exactly how to work in a tech company, in my case, if you've never interned at a Facebook or a Google or whatnot. So really coming from a place of supporting underrepresented groups in a way that's true and that makes sense for the people that you want to bring into in an equal and just way. Also changing the inertia when it comes to questions. I have the same problem. I've been asking the same types of questions for years, and I only recently trying to change and really think about what is it that I'm actually asking for. And I think about myself. When I started in this field, there was no data science when I graduated, or when I got my master's and quit my PhD program. We were just statisticians or applied statisticians or intelligence analysts or whatnot. But we were all asked these incredibly complex math questions and theorems and coding. We were unicorns ultimately. We had to do all these things. And you would be surprised at how that hasn't really changed in some companies. We're still requiring people to show and highlight the fact that there are these unicorns that know everything about ML and data science and statistics and coding. And why is it so hard to find find the right candidates to meet our diversity numbers? We need to ask the right questions. Over time, I actually really love people who participate in Kaggle competitions. I like to brush up on skills on Kaggle, uploading notebooks, doing some work that really shows how much, how they approach a problem, because that's really what I'm looking for, especially with junior engineers. With senior engineers, it's application of the work, examples of how they take business problems and create scalable and efficient solutions. So that is really what we want to tease out of the interview process, and hopefully expand our reach by reaching those underrepresented groups by being in the front seat, recruiting with our hiring managers and with our recruiters.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I think one of Chris's actually hiring managers that she's worked with had this really great rule of, you know, if you have a female or diverse candidate, set them up on my calendar. You know, I want to have a conversation with them anyways. And I think like having that kind of open mind and knowing, you know, what you can tailor, what sort of resources or kind of cultivating environment you can offer, and understand if it's the right fit and the right match, you know, for your initiatives is very important to stay grounded with. I'm going to move on to just understanding a little bit about work-life balance. And I know as a woman, sometimes that work-life balance could be a little bit more complex. You know, sometimes it's not. And even right now with COVID, you know, I'm very curious to understand, you know, in the past couple of months, how has work-life balance look like for you? And I want to start off with Kerry.
As I have a dog on my lap, obviously work and life boundaries have been clearly bled over the past number of months. But I mean, I don't have kids, and I can't even imagine the difficulty for my colleagues that have kids right now, both men and women. It's extremely difficult. I have a few people on my team that have kids, and you know, they apologize every time their kids enter the room and we're having a call, and it's like never. From my standpoint, I actually find the openness of people revealing their personal lives to others actually is making people closer. But obviously it's you can't devote your mental attention to any one task right now, and I think that's kind of universally true for many people. And so I think you know, there's been a number of studies. McKinsey has done some work recently on forecasting the impact this will have on female leadership going forward. So I'm worried about that, to be honest. And so I really am sort of in what I can do is you know, I try to provide as much flexibility for my group as I can. I'm especially understanding for people that have kids, especially young kids right now, because they're kind of torn between the lesser of two evils constantly in terms of the decisions that they have to make. And I think just echoing previous comments in this panel earlier, like having empathy is just really important. And that's, you know, especially right now, it's kind of more important than I think we've historically thought. And then I hope what'll last going forward is people maintaining the sense of empathy and encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work, whether they're in the office or remote.
Yeah, amazing perspective. And I think to what you mentioned, actually, from the female leadership perspective, or the study, sorry, I think some of the highlights that even come from that is just how like systemically ingrained even like role purposes or the purpose of like a female role in a relationship or in a family can take into effect and bleed into what your career progression could look like and the opportunities you have. So again, this is a very complex topic, and you know, showcasing a lot of these perspectives is just so important. I'm curious, Stacey, about your particular experience. How has work-life balance been for you these past couple of months?
So I'm a consultant, so usually I travel to my clients. So my work has been early mornings. I'm in LA, so you know, sometimes my clients, well, there've been a lot of East Coast, and I've had a lot of 6 a.m. starts to my day. But again, I don't have a family, so I have that flexibility. Because I'm in LA, I can also leave at 3 p.m. to go surfing once I started my day at 6 if I have the energy. So actually, I've tried to have the best positive spin I possibly can on this. And I feel very lucky that my company and just tech in general offers a lot of work from home support. I mean, the fact that a lot of us are still able to be in jobs right now, I'm very grateful for that. I have had a bit of toll on the mental health, like everyone for sure, because even if I wasn't with my clients, I would go into an office because I'm a social human. And if you can't tell, I'm a definite extrovert. So I need that interaction. And so that's been quite hard because you can't just go and grab someone for a cup of tea or a coffee or bump into someone. And even when I've led a team, it's been harder to kind of know what they're going through because, you know, unless I kind of check in with them or I have a call and I can hear in their voice, because we don't always use video, I can tell something's wrong. And it's kind of just hard to have that kind of stronger interaction and be more aware of what's going on in people's lives as well. So I struggle with that. And then in the practical sense of my job, not being with my clients and working directly with them and having to do that over, we use WebEx again, our clients don't tend to have video on. And so the engagement levels being kind of tough at times. So using lots of different tools and techniques, and design thinking has moved to mural boards and doing a lot of virtual collaboration on tools like that as well. So it's been quite a learning curve to make sure that I can support everyone I need to support, whether it's my clients or my team when I'm leading a team, and then just trying to keep myself sane and busy, as busy as possible.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm conscious of time, but I kind of want to rework that question a little bit for you, Sonali. I know work-life balance definitely has many shapes and forms, especially for us in the past couple of months. But how has it been like for you? And perhaps I'm a little bit curious as well to understand, you know, how work-life balance might have changed some like hiring dynamics in your current org, or what that means to the growth of your organization as well.
We have not stopped, which is, it was very easy for everybody on the team to transition to video only. And we're all working at a high pace, which is to say that it's been really hard to create work-life balance because the pace has maintained. We're all hiring aggressively, and it's been a great hiring market for us, to be honest with you. But people on the team are absolutely tired. It's really hard to not, you know, before you would kind of come in at 10 o'clock and work until 6:30 and it was okay. Now people start feeling guilty when they don't log in at 8 a.m. And not go until like 6 or 6:30 and then log back in after dinner because there's nothing else to do. I read an article this week about Zoom or video conferencing fatigue. And really it is when you have a video up, you are looking at things or high attention to detail in a degree that you don't get in a normal environment, an outside non-virtual environment. So it is exhausting mentally. And, you know, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 5-year-old. There's no schools open. Trying to manage a 20-person team, it is exhausting. It's nonstop. And although it's very hard for me, I think going back to empathy, understanding that it's hard for different people in different ways is the most important thing. Just because it's hard for me, it doesn't mean that it's not hard for someone who's by themselves. It's months of non-social interaction is really difficult, or people who have parents at home or can't see their parents. You know, I have someone whose parents are in China and she really has no one else, and trying to encourage her to have social interactions or meet other people, and just coaching people in so many different ways has been the best way to try to manage this period. And also being really flexible. In the beginning, we went into kind of meeting overload. Everything was a meeting or in Slack, and everyone was totally overwhelmed. So very recently, we just decided to tell people to block off time where you don't speak to anyone. Or I've created study halls, essentially times where you can just sit, no words could be exchanged during that time, but someone else is there, and kind of reduce the friction on asking a question to someone who in the past you would have just asked over, your desk or tap on the shoulder. And then lastly, the most important thing is definitely taking breaks, encouraging people to go on vacation, even if it's a staycation. It's really hard for them to do. It's hard for me to do, but really stressing it, making sure that that's top of mind, that it's okay, and to take care of yourself first.
Awesome. And then going on to Kerry, I'm curious about perhaps some of the initiatives or over at your org, or perhaps how things have changed kind of post-COVID.
In terms of like flexibility or like in general hiring practices differences?
Yeah, sorry if I wasn't clear there with my question. I guess just to understand a bit more about hiring practices and managing teams and some of the challenges around that.
So I think most of my team, because I think it's interesting. In data science, it's a lot easier to be remote than it is for a lot of other parts of Amgen's organization. There's a pretty substantial part of Amgen's organization that has worked on site the entire time, because we manufacture medicines that go to patients out of our site in Thousand Oaks, including those that go to clinical trials. That hasn't stopped. So people are still going in there. So there's a non-trivial amount of Amgen that is working on site. For my team, I mean, I've had people do rotations in Iceland. I have a team member in Berlin, another team member in Singapore, team member on the East Coast. So we're kind of used to being virtual. I do think that the work-life balance hours have been kind of muddled. And to Sonali's point, there is a lot of like after dinner logging on. Most of my team is younger, so there is nothing kind of to do after dinner. Some of the people on my team have moved to stay with their parents in other parts of the US. So we kind of have like a cross US team right now. Somebody's in Colorado, another person's in Rhode Island. But I think that the good part of it, or the way that I'm trying to see the positive, is that if particularly for some of the members of my team that are able to kind of be digital nomads right now, they're really trying to embrace it outside of work, and it really helps set their own work-life boundaries a lot more clearly. Like, I am going skiing this weekend, I am going hiking this weekend, I will not be reachable. And that's really helpful. I think for me, what we're in the process of moving to a bigger house, so that we're like in an area we're moving to Agora Hills, so it's a lot closer to like hiking and stuff like that. So I've actually found exercise is a way to kind of set those boundaries a lot clearer. And I think it's important for me as a leader to set the expectations for my team. Like, you're not expected to be responding to this after this time. Like, you can look at it in the morning, it's not urgent, no one's going to get hurt, no one's at risk. Just making people understand the priority, because it's really, really easy to stay on 100% of the time. And it's a kind of a mix of leadership expectations in terms of not imposing that even unintentionally from your team. I've been a real fan of send later auto functionality from Outlook and Gmail, because then you're not sending, even if you feel okay, like it's off my head, I don't have to deal with it. Why impose that to your team member? It's not worth it. It's like, why do that stress to other people if you don't, it doesn't lead to anything. So I think the easiest way that people can kind of help enforce those boundaries, especially if they're a manager, is use the send later feature and have it sent in the morning the next day rather than in the evening.
Yeah, awesome tips and awesome things to kind of consider it, to being courteous to people's boundaries and expectations while being remote. And I know we have about 4 minutes left, and we have a great question actually on Huva from Rishav Chatterjee. I'm just reading off here. One of my friends identifies as a woman of color and is part of the LGBTQ community. The traditional educational system has been a challenge for her and has a dream to be a data scientist against all odds. Since so many companies have the culture of, needing prior experience and having a degree, what advice would you give to Rishav's friend to help her achieve her goal? And would love to hear from Stacey.
Okay, so I think in terms of education to be there, there is so many great resources online. I mean, I always throw back to my machine learning Coursera course, but so many materials and things to do to be educated in the topic. My expectation, and I'll defer to the recruiters on this call, is the biggest hurdle will be getting the foot in the door. So once you're in the interview process, you get kind of asked probability and statistic questions, or how would you translate this business problem to a metric? And there will be questions on your experience. So, what similar projects, or whether that's, something on Kaggle, or whether that's something you're supporting a nonprofit to get experience, you're doing data manipulation at a nonprofit to help them out, or some sort of volunteering. As long as you can articulate how that comes back to enhancing your skills or how you led people in whatever way, I feel like during that process, there are so many resources online to kind of support that effort. And I don't think you necessarily need the degree. My expectation will be to get to that point, to get in front of that recruiter because the job says they want a bachelor's and prefer a master's or PhD or whatever. So I'm expecting that would be the hurdle. And so for that, I guess the best thing is networking in terms of getting someone to advocate for you, like someone that knows that you're capable of this job, and helping them to put you in front of that recruiter to support you and encourage them to take you seriously despite this one tick. And that's one of the things that bothers me when it comes to gender as well, is even the things we put ourselves for generally as women, we don't tend to apply for jobs unless we have all the capabilities. And so, yes, that is one of the requirements. But if you can tick so many other parts of the job description, I think you should be putting yourself forward. And my best way of suggesting that is getting a network and people to help you. That's all I've got, and we're running out of time.
Awesome, thank you. And if anyone has any additional questions, we'll still be online to answer anything through the Whova app. And, if you have any questions to any of us particularly, please message us, reach out over LinkedIn. Harnham also has a website, harnham.com/US, if you're curious to see some of our resources. It does look like we're up on time, but this is a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to some of the additional chatter over Whova and answering any additional questions people might have.
Thank you, Chris and Carla, for moderating this fascinating panel session. Thank you for the panelists for sharing your expertise during the session. The panel was, to me, very insightful, informative, especially discussing such an important topic in the field of data science. I hope attendees are inspired to be a part of the conversation, participate in making changes after learning so much from these experts in the panel. Thank you, attendees, for the interaction. This concludes our panel session. Feel free to connect, network with your speakers or other attendees via Whova. Enjoy the rest of DataCon LA 2020. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.